All right. My guest on the podcast today is my new friend, Uriah Kiser. Uriah is the president and publisher of Potomac Local Media down in Virginia, which we were just talking about. I think, and he has a longer history than that in local media, which I will ask him right now. But yeah, Uriah, thanks, man. Good to see you again. Thanks for jumping on here with me.
Yeah. Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, and once again, I really appreciate that. So you know how it goes. I'd love to just hear your story. We had a previous call, but I'd like you to tell myself again in the audience just your background in local media and yeah, your story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started in TV, and that was my sort of foray into all of this. I mean, I guess it goes back to when I was 9 years old. And I grew up in just outside of Washington, D.C., in the suburbs there. And so, when I turned on the TV as a 9-year-old, and a lot of the news that we watch from the local outlets. I mean, national news is local news in D.C. So we got all kinds of news, right, in the Washington, D.C. area. And I thought well, wouldn't it be cool to have that job? Wouldn't it be cool to be able to be the eyes and ears of a community? And so I, was fortunate to have to go to a high school with a TV program, and we actually got to go to the White House. This was unfortunately in your neck of the woods, the Columbine shooting that happened years
Yep.
ago. And it was right after that. And President Clinton got a bunch of people together at the White House, and they were talking about ways to prevent youth violence and all this, curb violent images on TV. And so it was a real opportunity and I get to interview a few famous people, and I was right in the press line with, all the big network reporters. And President Clinton we were outside in the Rose Garden at the White House. And I'm like, well, I really want to go talk to the president. Like we're here, I gave up my whole day for this. And here I am 17. And
Probably won't happen again. Yeah.
yeah, I know. And so I want to talk to the president. So I jumped the rope line, and people were like, what is he doing? So I don't know if my camera crew came on. We had a camera crew there from our, the students and whatever. And but some of the other reporters came over, and I actually walked up to the president. And luckily, I don't think I had any red dots on my forehead because there was so much secret security around there in that area. And I just politely waited. I said, should I tap him on the back of the shoulder? Nah, that's probably not a good idea. But I did wait, and he did turn around, and I got 3 questions in with the president. And that really said, wow, I like this. I like doing this. I like being able to tell these types of stories. So I went on and I worked at a small TV station in southern West Virginia. And from there, I worked in some TV in the Washington, D.C. area. And, I liked it. It was fun. And then there was an opportunity for me to go into, oddly enough, newspapers. And I went to a newspaper that I had actually chucked into driveways when I was growing up, and went there. And I actually got out of the news business for a second, the editorial side, and wondered, how does all this get paid for? Like, who pays for all of this? How does the business side of all this works? So I learned how to sell ads, and I went and worked in the advertising side of the business. And, I started as an ad assistant. They gave me a territory later on, and I had my own, book of business going on there. And I said, you know what? This is too much money. I'm doing too good. Let me figure out how to get paid a lot less and work a lot harder. And that's actually, I didn't set it out like that, but that's what happened. And that job came open as a newspaper reporter in the company I was with. And it was in a different town. And it was a weekly newspaper, and I took it, and and being a newspaper reporter was actually the most fun job I've ever had. Of course, I was picking and choosing what bills I wanted to pay that month and figuring out how to make it work financially. But I mean, gosh, it was like the life of kings, right? Going out and covering the stories. I mean, they figured out I was really good at chasing cop cars and you go into this breaking news events. So my editor gave me a laptop and a police scanner and said, as long as you email me stuff, I know you're working. And so she left me to my own devices. And so I was the cops and crime guy. There was the traffic guy. I'd go to, all the things, the city council, the courts, all this stuff, wherever there was news. And it was awesome. But after a while, probably around 2009, 2010, the layoffs started to happen at this newspaper. And this newspaper had been around for a combined 150 years. There was 2 newspapers. In 2008 they combined and became one, and it was a cost saving measure, I believe. And then in 2012 the newspaper closed. And this is after years of layoffs. I mean, I can't tell you the demoralization that was when they closed down the press. And it was so much fun to hear the press. I mean, it was the last vestige of making you feel like you actually worked at a newspaper, because all the pinup boards or have the layout boards that they used to use, which was before my time. I mean, by the time I got there, it looked like any other office building with computers and desks. But we had the press, and that was cool. But when that was shuttered and they started printing the paper in Richmond, which is almost about 100 miles away from where our office was, and they would truck it up every night, things kind of, we knew at that point it wasn't going to get any better. And so the paper closed. 2 years before it closed, I started Potomac Local News, and we served generally the same area that the newspaper did. And I started wanting to keep local news alive. I mean, that was the whole idea. Like, this is the same area that I used to be a paper boy in, the same area I went to high school in, the same area that now had lost its newspaper. And I wanted to do my best to carry the banner, as it were. So just yesterday we turned 16 years old, and
Crazy. Congrats.
Thank you. And to this day, Potomac Local News still covers why the cops were on your street last night, what's happening in your child's school, what did the city council talk about, what new fun restaurants and businesses are opening in your neighborhood. That is our mission. And though we've learned the best practices and, been down some bunny trails that really didn't work out for us when it comes to maybe some offshoots, maybe like a local deals site, or, doing, some events or meetups or something, some that worked, some that didn't. Our core mission has been the same. And we hope to be around for another 16 years, at least.
That's awesome, man. That's a really cool story. 16 years. It's through a wild time, too, from 2010, it says on here. So I guess you might have started before that, but full-time from 2010 until today, June 2026.
Yeah.
You kind of talked there. You're like, you had a deals thing that didn't work out, and you've experimented with stuff. I'd love if you could tell me a little on the business side, how things have evolved. How did it start? Like, how'd you make your first dollar at Potomac? And then, like, how has kind of the revenue mix kind of shifted over time and stuff? Can you talk about that a little bit? Yeah.
So really it's my authentic story. The first dollar came from a mailbox guy who ran a pack and ship store and had some mailboxes. And I remember that. So Doug Madison was his name, and he ran a pack and ship store. And it was just my ability to go in and tell my story about who I was and what we're doing and why we're doing it for. But over time, and very quickly, I learned that you should focus on the pain points that your clients or your potential clients have, and focus less on the fact that you were first to this breaking news story, or that you beat the Washington Post on this coverage or whatever. Because at the end of the day, they're like, yeah, that's neat, cool, fun, whatever. But how does that really help me? Oh, my 2:00's here. I got to go. Right. So I learned over time that, while my story is very important in the heart of the business, and that's part of the pitch, I learned very early on that, I need to identify how to best serve this client and solve their problems. And instead of just coming in and saying, well, here's my rate card and here's everything we can do, and we have a, pretty decent sized audience and we're local, is to actually understand where they're coming from and what issues that they're having in their business. And once we established that, I tended to do a lot better in sales. On the editorial side, once I established that, because when I started, I came from that, a newspaper that had 8 or 10 reporters in the newsroom and 10, 12 people over in advertising sales, and so there was people, right? It was just me, right? When I started Potomac Local, and so it took me a little while to realize that I cannot do this job the way we put out a newspaper and a website, and I couldn't do it. And then it was not my job to figure out how to fill the internet with things to read. But lo and behold, there's plenty of things on the internet to read. And I should be focused on making good local content, telling the stories of my communities, and focusing on that. And eventually I did that. I started looking into quality over quantity. And that has all changed over the years. I mean, I think I may be back, a little bit doing a hybrid model of both today, and we can get into that if you want. But at its core, it's how can I serve my customer the best way I possibly can. I root for my customer. I shout out my customers every time if I can include an advertising client in a news story, which is rare, but if I can, I will. I'm a cheerleader for them, and I'm a cheerleader for the community. I think, when we take a look at, well, how do you cover stories from what angle? I always like to go in from the taxpayer perspective. Like, are you being good stewards of the tax money? Are you being honest and forthright with how it is you're spending our money? And because it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle that you're on, especially at the local level. I mean, you just
Hmm.
want good governance. When you
Yep.
flip the light switch, you want the lights to come on, you turn on your water, you want the water to come out of the tap. That's at the end, that's it. And so I feel like that's our job to make sure that's how we approach our news coverage.
Yeah, that's me dawning on me over the years doing this because I'm not from local media, as I'm sure you know if you're a listener. But just doing this podcast for the last few years, that's what's really dawned on me is how important it is for the local governance is very important. Like there's other lighter, fluffier things. I want to see the high school football score and what I can take my kids to go do this weekend and stuff. But it is super important.
Yeah, you bring up like high school football. So, and that's one of the things that we tried, I don't know, back in 2013, I think, is I hired a photographer, we got a sponsor, we did like a game of the week. And it was interesting. It didn't work out. The coverage really never moved the needle, and we did high school football. And when before the paper that I worked at closed, it was purchased by Warren Buffett and his Omaha media company for B&H, or I forget what it's called. But Warren Buffett, the guru, the money guy, bought the newspaper in a deal that included almost 170 newspapers in the Southeast U.S. And that one that I worked at was the only one that closed. He kept open every single one of them except for the one that I worked at. And they were really big. Buffett's company was really big on local sports because I guess they figured that if you were in the stands on a Friday night at a game, then you would run out to get the Saturday morning paper and pen up Johnny's picture of this winning touchdown pass, and that brings the community together. And a lot of the papers that he purchased were in communities with one, maybe two high schools. But where I am in Northern Virginia, where it's a very transient place, a lot of military, a lot of immigrants from outside the U.S. live here. It's changing all the time. My community at the time had, we have like more than 15 high schools in our area. And so it's very difficult for everyone to just root for the local team when there are 15 or 16 teams in the area. And so we tried sports and it didn't work out. We tried a local deal site back when I guess Groupon was getting real popular, and it didn't move the needle. It was just a distraction from things that we want to do. So today, and it's really through your podcast that I actually have become more comfortable with AI and doing what we're doing and actually feeling like I'm not breaking all the sacred rules of journalism after listening to some of your guests, especially a guy you had on from Palm Springs. But I was about to sell my business in 2023 because I felt like I had written every story there is to write in the communities that I served. It was just a different mayor who had been newly elected or just somebody different kind of saying the same thing. And I thought, I always wanted to be a police officer when I was a kid. Maybe I'll go into that. I like the cop beats. I like the crime beats. I like working with people. That's why I like to do the news, and I like to sell ads. I just like working with people. And I know that would be a very public-facing job, get to work with people. So I did a ride-along with a cop, and I've realized that a lot of those people are not the kind of people I want to be working with on a regular basis, unfortunately. And plus, at my age, I think that ship had sailed. And so it really got me thinking, okay, well, what can I do differently at my job? Because it is a privilege to do what I do, to serve my community in the way I do and be able to do it. And I've been doing it for so long and made so many sacrifices in which to continue to hold on to my company and plant this flag and keep the business going. And I went to a couple webinars, Broad Street ads. They're fantastic. I've been with Broad Street. I would think I'm like customer number 9 of theirs.
Shout out Kenny.
Yeah,
he's been on the pod before. Yep.
Great guy. And he did a couple webinars about ChatGPT and what it all means. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, but all right, I don't get it. And then he said, I interviewed a realtor and I asked him 3 questions about best staging for your home. If you want to sell your home, what are the best neighborhoods in this community? What are the schools? Whatever basic questions they were. And I took the responses, I recorded the conversation, and I made 3 sponsored posts out of it. And I'm like, wait a minute, you did what? Because since 2018, well before the pandemic, the areas in which we serve, we've been fortunate enough to have a lot of the public meetings be streamed online, whether it be YouTube or their own proprietary streaming software, whatever it is. So when the pandemic hit, we weren't scrambling to be like, oh my God, how are we going to do this or do that? I mean, we had already, but when I saw that I could take the transcript of a meeting or of anything and do almost anything I wanted to do with it, it completely changed my workflow and my approach and my outlook on the future of the business.
Yeah, I think we should dig into that a little bit too. First of all, thank you for saying that I've helped you not me, the guests mostly, have helped you kind of wrap your head around AI a little bit. But like, what actual like tactical things have you implemented? Could you dig into a few of those? Like, what's been the most impactful into your org? And also, can you set the stage? It's mostly just you running Potomac? Do you have some like freelancers? I believe you told me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got
Am I
some
wrong about that?
freelancers. Mostly are in high school, and since 2018,
right, that's right. You told me that.
Since 2018, we've had several freelancers come in. I think at the height of the pandemic, we had like, I don't know, 10 or 12, because they were all going to school, quote unquote, but they really had nothing to do early on in 2020. So, when I said, well, hey, you can come help me, I'll teach you journalism and what that looks like. And so it was all remote anyway. And to this day, because of AI and because of the fact that we're fortunate enough to have a lot of boards and commissions stream their meetings, a lot of what I do is remote. And so I have high school interns, and many of them have gone on to, one went on to the Washington Post, some of them have gotten really good careers in marketing or communications. So I'm very proud of that and being a mentor to them. But in terms of workflow, I will take a transcript and I will run it, through the LLM several times to dive down into, concise notes the way I want. And then I'll simply ask, what news articles can we write? And it'll churn out from each meeting. And sometimes these meetings are 2 hours long. Sometimes they're 10 hours long. It depends on, the jurisdiction and all kinds of things. But it'll at least give me 6 or 7 story ideas. And from there we make prompts. And then from there I, write the stories and go fact check them. And once everything checks out, we publish it. So so I count that as my original content. We are clear. We say this is written by AI, it generated, checked by a human, that sort of thing. And so those are what I consider to be our original content. What I will also do, and this is something that I picked up. I really like a site. It's called Capital Wire by Tegan Goddard. And I don't know Tegan Goddard. I've never met him. I don't really read his site on a regular basis because it's national politics. But his model I love, because he essentially copies and pastes the first sentence or two of an article, and he's linking out to like New York Times and Wall Street Journal stuff and all this political national stuff, but he'll link out directly to he'll kind of summarize or maybe just blatantly copy the first lead sentence and link out, and he'll do 10 of those a day, and people just really like the brevity of it. And if they want to read the whole thing, they can. So I use a tool called In Your Reader and RSS.app, and I have built more than 100 feeds. Many of them are just Facebook feeds to police departments, nonprofits, city governments, restaurants, small business, Main Street organizations, that sort of thing. And when I see something cool, like I will just, copy the text of the social media post off of Facebook or X or wherever I'm pulling from and run it through Grok. I use Grok daily, and it formats it just how I want it. First 1 or 2 sentences and the link to that post where they can go get more, or a website or a press release or whatever it is. Because to me, it's all community news. I don't need to say I spend hours on this particular story and put all my journalistic might into, back behind it. At the end of the day, people want to know what's going on in their community and why they should care. And sometimes that takes 600 words. Sometimes it takes 1,200 words. Sometimes it's a 180 character tweet. But at the end of the day, that's what we are doing to serve our audience.
Very cool. Real quick, I had another question, but I wanted to, you said you use Grok daily. What other, are you using other tools that would be considered AI? There's LLMs and there's other like tools and stuff too.
Yeah,
I like to see what everybody's using. Yeah.
Yeah. So ChatGPT is, I was moving away from ChatGPT, and then they came out with this whole updated image thing. And so I was like, well, I'm pulling you just when you thought you were out, they pull you right back in. And so I re-up my my paid subscription to ChatGPT, and that's been really great for making thumbnails. I run it's parallel to my to Potomac Local, but it's a YouTube channel, and I'm actually growing it out to be a fuller brand on its own, and it's separate from my community Potomac Local daily news website. But I use ChatGPT to make my thumbnails and to do that. So I do a lot of copy and pasting. And I found that when I speak into this microphone, I spend a lot of time, instead of typing, I will talk to it. I will dictate all day long. And I feel like if I'm not editing myself, because when you type, you edit yourself. Like, especially if you're a journalist, right? Especially, it's got to be AP style, and you got to be tight with your copy. But that's not the way these LLMs work. They brain dump, and then it'll get you what you think what it thinks you want, and then you can refine it from there. So I've found that just talking to it as if it were an employee is the way to go.
Very cool. I need to get it. I've heard that more and more, and I've heard more people firsthand tell me they've been doing that more. I need to implement that because I use a lot. I've been Claude pilled. I'm mostly a Claude user, but I use different ones for different purposes. Real quick, here's a question. I don't know if I've asked anybody this, but it's been on my mind a lot lately. Just one last thing on the AI thing. Has there been any AI tools or uses of AI that has actually helped your business on the revenue side? Or has it more been just like helping increase efficiencies, saving you a ton of time so you can work on revenue generating like activities and good reporting and stuff like that? Because I don't know if I've heard anybody say that it's actually like helped them grow the pie like that. What do you think?
What I have done on the revenue side is I will take so BroadStreet they have this incredible tool where it just automatically sends advertisers their previous months out, like I guess analytics is the word I'm looking for, and it does it automatically, so I don't have to touch it. And but yeah, that's great. But if you're an advertiser, if you're a small shop owner and you get this list of numbers and click through rates and blah blah blah, I mean, how much time are you really spend with it? Well, I mean, that's not what you do, and so I recognize that. And so what I do is I will take that information and put it into a prompt and explain exactly what it means, why they should care, how and how it either the numbers have improved or have changed or gotten worse, hopefully not, over the duration of the past month. That comes in handy at re-up time, because instead of just saying, here's a report, have a nice month, that is kind of me going deeper into that level of service to show them that we really do care about your success. And we want you to stay with us because we're going to do what we need to do to keep the numbers growing or to turn it around if it needs to be done. So that has helped. On a sales side, to try to get the client, a lot of people use the LLMs as Google. They're just replacing it and using it as Google. But obviously these things can do a lot more. So what I have done before I get to sit with a potential client, I will run them and do a profile on this business and ask the AI, hey, drill down in this business. Tell me what they're marketing. Tell me what they're selling. Identify potential pain points and where they may be having issues based on their website, based upon what they're putting out in social media, of where we could possibly identify some areas in which we can help them. When I do that, it shortens the sales cycle because, the old adage is, oh, well, and this part of the adage is true. People buy people. People,
Mhm.
they want to trust you, they want to know and like you, and they want to believe that you will do what you say you will do as a salesperson. But that no longer takes, 2 lunches and 3 phone calls and getting to know. I mean, if you come in and do your homework ahead of time and can identify their pain points and get their attention, suddenly they're not looking at the wall and checking their watch for their next appointment. They're actually paying attention. They're actually engaged with you because they, off the top, you understand the challenges they're facing, and then you have that opportunity to explain why you're the best fit to help them solve that challenge.
And that ties really back nicely with what you said at the top when I was asking you about just like the business side. And when you said just keeping your customers, I don't know what you said, ROI or their what helps them top of mind. And it really is a hard, like bipolar almost thing when people start that I've seen on this show. When people start a new kind of startup, a 1 person, 2 person newsroom, and they're coming from a big newspaper of having to be like, well, here, I really need to stay focused. I want my customers, my clients need, and I also want to do the breaking news and, get the story. It's really hard to separate those and everything.
Well, to your point, I mean, so the news is the art, right? That's the art.
Mm-hmm.
That's the creative part of all this. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was never, I've got to, be the best writer and the best, editor, and I'm, a literary guy. I'm not. For me, the thrill of the news is to post the news and send out a breaking news email and be like, hey, this is what's happening. It's like picking up the phone. I always tell my interns, and like, the most important thing in your story should be when you pick up the phone and you were to call your mom or your best friend or whatever. Hey, guess what? Can you believe this is happening? Like, that should be at the top of your news article. That's how I train them. And for me, that's the most fun part of this business. And yeah, that's the creative side. And that's the one, because there's always something going on in news that often calls us to do that. So you have to be really disciplined and take time to work on the business instead of always on the product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And oh yeah, so where I was going with that is you talked about like back in 2009, 2010, you saw the layoffs coming at the newspaper you were at. It seems like we're going through another kind of phase like that in the journalism industry, just in the economy in general. A lot of layoffs, thanks in some parts, to AI. I don't have hard data behind that, but there are a lot more people. I've seen some stories, a lot more journalists leaving places and just starting their own thing, starting a Substack or like a local news outlet like yours or something. So, with that in mind, when you left and started yours, and you had a background in sales and you were a reporter when you left, so that's the best of both worlds. I think a lot of these people trying to leave and start their own thing these days, maybe they're facing layoffs, are probably more on the art side. You said, doing the reporting, all that. What advice would you have for them, for somebody starting a new Potomac local, like in terms of actually, keeping those customers top of mind and running it as a business? Where do you think, like a lot of reporters, maybe, or maybe you, at a certain time in your life, got wrong
Yeah.
or aren't thinking about?
Well, first of all, it's with anything, know what your worth is and know why you're doing it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, your time is the most valuable thing that you have, and so how much are you willing to give of it to do this job? And because you're going to be giving a lot of your time, especially as you get it off the ground. The good thing is that there are several resources. So I was a founding member of Lion Publishers. LI was a local independent online news publishers. I served on the board for many years, and we started a Facebook group. This was back in like 2011 when we were getting founded, and it was just filled with just guys like us, like publishers who were laid off or quit or whatever, started their own thing, and they were all having a lot of the same issues, and a lot of them were advertising, like, how can we pay for all this, and how can we put food on the table? And there's so many resources that exist today, Line being one of them, that just did not exist when we started. So, I mean, I think to get in and just be able to identify these resources, there's Lion, there's a Facebook group called the Den. That is local independent online news publishers. It was born out. It's actually what Lion was born out of. It was really a Facebook group. Is what we born the whole not national nonprofit out of. Is kind of a cool story on its own. So do not be afraid to ask questions, because whatever challenges that you're having when it comes to selling or building a website, or should I do an email newsletter, or should I do a Substack? We've all been there. And so you have all of these people who have been around. The second thing that I will say, and this is kind of where I'm leaning into on the YouTube side of things, and you've got to talk to your audience every day. You had somebody on your podcast here recently who said, I think probably verbatim, just that. I mean, they are people want to be talked to. And in this day and age, when people are questioning everything they read, and now more increasingly everything they see on the internet, is that real? Is it AI? If you can have a conversation like we're having now with your audience, with your fans, with your tribe, with your people who have given you their trust and maybe their dollar for their membership or their subscription or their ad, it just makes it so much more valuable, because local news today is like walking into a bar, and I think this may be just news in general, not necessarily just local, but walking into a bar and finding the person that you like, or going to a public event or a thing, going to a public thing and finding a person that you know and like and say, hey, what's going on? What do you know? What do you say? What's new in the world? And you will listen to them talk to you and tell you what's new in the world, because you trust them. You find their insight valuable. And then you'll go and tell somebody else what you heard or read or listened to or what have you. Because we're sort of going back to the way it was about 100 years ago. If you think back to the newspapers and the press, really from the dawn of time up until about the 1920s, when you started a newspaper, it was because you wanted to rally a cause. You wanted to get people to go and vote a certain way or join a certain group, to get them to take an action and to give them a bunch of, propaganda, if you will, a bunch of why they should do it.
Yep.
But in the 1920s, someone came along. It was the rise of the department store. You had Montgomery Ward and Sears Roebuck, and they came to newspaper publishers and they said, well, wait, if you try to publish both sides of the story, we'll buy bigger ads, because it'll attract a bigger audience. You'll essentially be going for both sides of the spectrum. And publishers like, wow, that's really smart. We should do that. We should get that money. And then in the 1960s, when the AP came along and standardized the style of writing, so if you were in Albuquerque or if you were in Illinois, no matter where you were, you picked up a newspaper, it all kind of looked the same. So you would, get a sense of how to read it. So the AP style was born out of that. But now we're going into this new era where the personality is the brand. Who do I trust? Who do I want to hang out with? Who do I want to give of my time to get their podcast or their YouTube video or their newsletter? There's infinite number of these things out there. Where am I going to go? Who am I going to trust to get my information?
Yeah, that's great stuff. And I think a lot of people, I'm sure the audience of this podcast is probably different. They probably do know that. But a lot of folks I talk to don't realize the kind of the history you just said, how crazy newspapers used to be a couple hundred years ago. Like in the founding of our country, just the different politicians would have their own newspaper. And they said terrible things. It was like a really bad Twitter account. Like it would be like, Benjamin Franklin's newspaper said this about Sam Adams, and they're just like chucking insults back and forth. But that's an interesting little history lesson you just gave me there.
Sorry to bore you with it, but yeah,
it's super cool. Yeah. Oh man, what else? I had some more stuff written up here. What could you just real quick? I was just looking at Potomac Local News. You got the website, you got a newsletter. What other formats are you utilizing? Are you using social at all? You said you're leaning into YouTube more.
Yeah. So Instagram, all the socials that we do now. Like you recently had somebody on from Canada who is like really leaned into Instagram and
yeah.
So
Lauren London. Yeah.
Yeah. Great interview. I like that, but that's not kind of what we do. It was funny. We built our audience on social because we leaned in heavily to breaking news, like house fires, car crashes, things like that. And we'll still put that stuff on, but I don't get in my car and run down to the scene of breaking news like I used to when I started. But if it weren't for social media back in 2010, what actually showed people our posts, I don't think we wouldn't have grown as fast as we did because just the algorithm was so much different back then. I did that. And then for a year in 2017, I started thinking to myself, well, should we do reader revenue? Should we put up a paywall? And it took me a year of figuring out what I'm going to do and should I do it? And I mean, I've been giving essentially free bus rides away to everybody who wants to read my site. And then one day I'm going to say, nope, you got to pay. How's that going to go? And so in 2018, we launched a hard paywall and we decided to lock down maybe 2% of our content. And it was like the original stuff. If I had to go city council meeting, I was there for hours, I would lock that stuff down. But inevitably, it was always the story about the fire truck that caught on fire and it would blow my,
Yep.
Pulitzer Prize winning whatever, in terms of numbers, it would just make my Pulitzer Prize winning whatever look stupid. So in 2020, we did a website redesign and we went with a different paywall provider and it was a leaky paywall. And essentially after a couple clicks, they would ask you to give your email address. And then after a couple more clicks, they would ask you to subscribe. And we started our email newsletter, our all RSS. It still is today, all RSS. I don't have a fancy email newsletter on Potomac Local. It just sends it out every day, 4 o'clock RSS. Here's everything we put on the site for today. But from 2011 until 2020, we had gotten maybe 3,000 email addresses on that list. And then once we went with leaky paywall, plus this little thing they called the pandemic. Plus, we had some riots in our communities that we served after the George Floyd thing, which I never we were outside of D.C. We were well outside of D.C. And I said to myself, that's never going to, they may do it in downtown Washington. They have had riots in Washington, D.C. before, but it won't happen here. And I was completely wrong. And so that was a big news year. So we went from 3,000 to
wow
in a year.
Yeah,
and I'm like, that was like one of the best things that we ever did. And so we kept the paywall. We actually we migrated back to Memberful, which was the company we started with, because the company we went to kind of went away, like some startups do, unfortunately. But we still have the paywall, and we still, again, only lock down about 2% of our content. The rest is free to read. And then with our YouTube channel. So I rebranded it, and and I clearly, so on the website I can count on maybe one hand over 16 years the amount of op-eds that I have written. Okay, maybe 2, maybe 10, over 16 years, but we've never told anybody who to vote for. Never candidates. We never endorsed a candidate. It's just. We've simply just tried to give news. And if we write an op-ed, it's normally really boring. It's like, well, they should have zoned this property industrial A1 versus, it's boring stuff that only if you're paying attention do you really care about.
Right.
So I rebranded our YouTube channel. They started when I started Potomac Local, and back on March 1st of this year. And I made it more of a statewide news coverage for Virginia. And put on there, bless you, by the way.
Thank you.
Put on news and opinion. And I wanted to, because I find myself sometimes, I'll listen to NPR, but sometimes I'll yell at the radio station. I'll read an article, and Fox News too. Sometimes I'll yell at the screen when I'm reading something. And so I wanted a place where I could air my venting and my screaming. And we went from 500 subscribers that we had amassed from 2011 until March 1st of this year. And today we're at like 25,000 in a course of 3 months. And so it tells me that there's a real need for someone to, and all I do on that channel is, as I use that feed that I was telling you about that I built in In Your Radio, this RSS app that I use. And I have all this newspapers in the state, all the TV stations in the state. And I go down there and I just look for things that I think are interesting to me and would be interesting to people who live across the state. And I highlight that. And I always say this story is from, VIR in Charlottesville, Virginia, or this is from the, Richmond Times Dispatch. And it's so for me, it's in a way, it's highlighting the work of other journalists, but it's also a way for me to give my opinion about a thing. And YouTube, I think, knows what to do because I think over the years, I was using YouTube as sort of like this video collector. Like this may be a video of a new business, a ribbon cutting at a new store. And the next video may have been the mayor saying something about this thing they're going to take a vote on. And YouTube didn't really know what to do with it, especially because it was so hyper local. YouTube wants mass appeal. And so if you can go from, instead of just targeting a community of 500,000 people, Virginia has almost 9 million people in it. So YouTube's like, okay, I know what to do with that. I can show that to more people. So I think the algorithm started to work in our favor once we broadened it out. And of course, some people may be inclined to agree with my opinions a little bit more than others. So I think, there's people who, built a tribe in that respect. So so that's doing very well. And so I created another YouTube channel where I can, again, put local videos for Potomac Local. And when I interview the mayor or go to ribbon cuttings like I did yesterday, I can put that kind of stuff on there and still have it out where people can see it. But it's completely different from the other YouTube thing I'm doing.
Very cool, man. Very cool. I think I've gotten to everything I wanted to ask. Is there anything I missed that you wanted to bring up, that you wanted to share with this audience or anything like that?
I think I like to hear people talk about embracing AI. I think it's something that we have to do. It's no longer a question of if, but when that you do it. I mean, we can all say, it's just like, to me, it's like saying, yeah, I know you have a car, Paul. You really enjoy driving it, but I'm going to ride my horse. No, don't worry about it. And we can't be like that. And so I would love to hear more people talk about their process, their tools, their outcomes of how they're using it to serve their community. I think once we start hearing more of that, we're going to be in a lot better place, because when we started Line, the conferences, we all got together once a year in Chicago, and it was fun, informative. We had a big catering bill, and we always everybody ate well. It was fun. But the best takeaways from those Line conferences is when we went down to the Billy Goat Tavern. It was right next to the Chicago Tribune. The Trib's no longer there, but they used to be where the reporters hang out. So it was cool. We would go down there late at night, have some beers, eat some pretzels, and just really talked about, hey, what's working where you are, and just swap stories. That was one of the best takeaways of our days in Chicago. And I think if we as an industry can talk about what's really working, then we can take a smidgen of that and implement it in our communities. We'll all be better off.
That's awesome, man. Great stuff. Uriah, what should I link to? What do you want me to point people to? I'll do your website, your YouTube channel, all that stuff. What else?
Yeah, so it's the community website is Potomac Local News. Actually, it's potomaclocal.com, and the YouTube is at Virginia Insider. So I'm working on a website for that. It'll be virginiainsider.news, but that website's not up yet. I've got my Beehive thing ready to go, and it's like everything else. It's a work in progress.
Yeah, I know how it goes. There's 15 spinning plates that you're trying to keep all going at the same time, right? That's how I talk about my life, at least these days. Cool, man. Well, thank you. This is awesome. We should do it again sometime. Thanks for taking the time, and have a good day, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been a
Yeah.
blast.
Awesome. Thanks.